All right, the last time we talked about Shangqing Taoism or mystical Taoism. Today we want to talk about the development of alchemical Taoism. And I want to start with this quote from Eva Wong's book, Taoism, An Essential Guide, which has been a sort of our guidebook. It says, in the alchemist crucible, ordinary metals are transformed into gold when their impurities are purged by the fire of the furnace. In Taoist alchemy, it is not metals that are refined, but the body and mind of the alchemist, renewed by the harmonious vapors of yin and yang and transformed by fire and water. The alchemist emerges from the cauldron, reconnected to the primordial life energy of the Tao. We're talking about alchemy here, and alchemy is the medieval forerunner of chemistry. It was very big in Europe as it was in China. So Taoist alchemy is sometimes referred to as physiological alchemy because it is the goal to transform the physiological structure and functions of the body. There are two forms of physiological alchemy: external alchemy and internal alchemy. In external alchemy, minerals and herbs are used to concoct a pill or elixir that, when ingested, can make the alchemist literally immortal. The methods of external alchemy are therefore concerned with such practices as building a furnace, gathering minerals and herbs, and compounding substances. In internal alchemy, the ingredients of immortality are found inside the body, and it is these substances that are refined and transformed. The methods of internal alchemy are therefore concerned with cultivating the vital energy of life in the body, qi, without the aid of external substances. So, although the methods of external and internal alchemy are different, the early alchemists saw no conflict between the two. Most of the early alchemists practiced calisthenics, meditation, and sexual yoga while they were engaged in the research and manufacturing of elixirs. So at that point, there was no need to distinguish between the external and internal techniques. It was only when the two methods were regarded as incompatible, especially after the Tang Dynasty, that it became necessary to distinguish between them. Many modern practitioners of internal alchemy use herbs and special foods to supplement their practice of qi kung, cultivating qi, and meditation. Thus, internal alchemy as practiced today is actually closer to the spirit to the early form of physiological alchemy in the 3rd century. It incorporates both external and internal methods. Chinese are big on herbal remedies and all kinds of cures. When I was in a Chinese market in Hong Kong years ago, it was amazing the amount of dried sheep placenta that was being sold. So they got all kind of crazy things they're into. So Taoism's concern with health and longevity dates back to the writings of Laozi and Zhuangzi in the philosophical period. Throughout the Warring States period, Taoism's emphasis on health and caring for the body increased, and by the end of that period, about 221 BCE, there was a class of people who claimed to be experts in the arts of longevity and immortality. They were the Feng Shi. We talked about them earlier. They used to be the itinerant, statecraft and military craft masters like Confucius and Laozi, but when those services weren't needed, they sort of turned to the masters. They became the masters of the formula. One group of Feng Shi specialized in the use of talismanic magic for healing and became the predecessors of the celestial teachers, or Central Orthodox Taoism. Another group of Feng Shi who specialized in the techniques of, prolonging life, ingested minerals, practiced calisthenics, sexual alchemy, and yoga-like methods of internal hygiene, and became the pioneers of both external and internal alchemy. The belief in immortality was very strong during the Han Dynasty, and the Feng Shi's search for elixirs or pills of immortality was supported by emperors and nobility. The emperors and upper class were most interested in fast-acting formulas. Just give me a pill, basically. As a result of experimentation with minerals and herbs was favored over the disciplined practice of calisthenics and meditation. That's just hard. Not all alchemists had rich patrons like Han emperors. Some were hermits who worked in their own laboratories. One such was Wei Po Yang of the Eastern Han, and he had a laboratory in the mountains. Wei Po Yang not only attained immortality, according to Taoist tradition, but left an alchemical treatise called the Triplex Unity, which is considered by Taoists as the ancestor of all texts of alchemy, internal and external. The most important principle in the process of creation and renewal is the interaction of yin and yang. The concrete manifestation of yin and yang is water and fire. Thus, knowing how to use fire and water and when to apply heat and when to cool are crucial to cultivating energy and renewing life. Life is renewed when impurities in the body are purged. Similarly, a pill or elixir of immortality is created when the appropriate substances are refined and compounded, interacting with both fire and heat. Success in the alchemical endeavor depends on the quality of the furnace, the bellows, and the cauldron. A good furnace is needed to provide fires that are hot enough for tempering the ingredients. Efficient bellows are required to produce accurate temperatures at different stages of refining, and a leak-proof cauldron is needed to contain the substances after they have been purified. In external alchemy, these items refer to laboratory equipment, obviously. But internal alchemy, the furnace, the bellows, the cauldron have physiological equivalents inside the body. The furnace generates yang fire, or vital energy, and is driven by the yin power of water, or generative energy. The process really is a golden pill. It's what Taoism calls it. Medieval alchemy called it the Philosopher's Stone, this elixir of literal immortality. In Taoist alchemy, the elixir is also called the sacred fetus. When the triplex unity speaks of water and fire, heating and cooling, building the furnace, positioning the cauldron, applying the bellows, it is simultaneously describing the processes of internal and external alchemy. The early alchemists did not neglect the importance of stilling the mind and dissolving desire. Parts of the triplex unity describe meditation-like techniques. The triplex unity also contains references suggesting that sexual techniques might have been used, together with non-sexual methods, in the gathering and transformation of internal energy. It is therefore not surprising that the triplex unity is considered by Taoists to be the ancestor of all alchemical texts. Internal and external, sexual and non-sexual techniques are all presented together in this alchemical classic, suggesting that the early alchemists saw no conflict in these methods of seeking immortality. And I'll also say, despite all this sort of fantastical sound of what I'm saying, the triplex unity also maintains that continuity with philosophical Taoism of the Tao Te Ching and Zhuangzi. It talks about cultivating qi. It talks about releasing desire and sort of philosophical concerns. They're connected. Another great figure of early Taoist alchemy was Kohun. He lived around the end of the 4th century of the Common Era. He was part of a powerful family. Members of the Ko family played important parts in the development of Taoism in the 4th and 5th centuries. One of them, Ko Suan, was a custodian of the Ling Pao scriptures of the celestial teachers, the Ling Pao, the sacred spirit text. The Ko family also had marital ties with the Su family of the Shangqing lineage, the mystical Taoism. So these relationships probably accounted for the very eclectic nature of Kohun's own practice and beliefs. He wrote all his writings are collected in a book called The Sage Who Embraces Simplicity. It's sort of a very eclectic collection of Taoist practices and beliefs, and so it's almost like an encyclopedia. Whereas the triplex unity is entirely concerned with alchemy, the sage who embraces simplicity is almost, encyclopedic in its scope. Its formulas, list of ingredients, procedures for making an external pill, advice on stilling the mind and minimizing desire, methods of calisthenics and breath control, ideas about holding the one. The sage who embraces simplicity also describes methods for getting rid of internal monsters that are characteristic of Shangqing Taoism, the use of talismans, other protective measures for traveling in the mountains to look for herbs and minerals, stories of immortals, discussions of ethical action, reward and retribution, and miscellaneous advice on Taoist practice. The amazing thing is that Kohun did not see these practices as inconsistent or conflicting. Although an eclectic, Kohun still regarded external alchemy as the royal road to immortality, the pill. For him, the key to making the pill of immortality was in collecting the right ingredients and preparing them in the correct way. Despite the emphasis on ingesting minerals, however, the sage who embraces simplicity was very clear about the role of ethics in the arts of immortality. Physical techniques, external and internal, must be accompanied by the correct mental attitude to be effective in prolonging life. Thus, for Kohun, stilling the mind, minimizing desire, regulating the emotions, and doing good deeds are all integral to cultivating longevity. So again, we see the connection to the Tao Te Ching in philosophical Taoism. In his practice of alchemy, Kohun may not be a purist like Wei Po Yang, but he is still an alchemist. So toward the end of the southern dynasties, circa 580 of the Common Era, the Taoist alchemists were having doubts about ingesting compounds made from lead, mercury, cinnabar, and sulfates, which we know now, of course, are poisonous. Many alchemists and their patrons died eating elixirs concocted from these poisonous materials. The lack of confidence in producing an immortal pill was seen in the use of prisoners on death row as guinea pigs in the alchemical experiments. The failure to produce a pill of immortality called for a re-examination of the techniques of external alchemy and a re-evaluation of the theoretical foundations of the entire endeavor. With the Tang Dynasty, China entered a period of political stability and prosperity. More emperors died of poisoning from ingesting minerals in the Tang Dynasty than any other dynasty. In the early Tang, all the conditions were right for external alchemy to make a comeback after its decline toward the end of the southern dynasties. Elixirs of immortality became an integral part of the social life of the Tang Dynasty. People just can't give up on the idea of a pill. The imperial patronage of external alchemy created a new group of Taoist alchemists, those who worked solely on the research and fabrication of the elixir of immortality, which leads us, to a separation of internal and external alchemy. Renewed enthusiasm for a pill for external alchemy produced several new ideas. In the Tang Dynasty, alchemists acknowledged that there are two kinds of elixirs. The first kind occurs naturally and is found in minerals and stones that have absorbed the yin and yang vapors of the universe. When correct amounts of sunshine and moonlight have been absorbed over a period of 4,320 years, don't know why that number, the substances like lead and mercury will be transformed into cinnabar, which will eventually crystallize into a pill with a golden color, hence the golden pill. The person who ingests this pill will become immortal. Needless to say, pills that occur under these natural circumstances are very rare. Thus, alchemists were forced to find ways to manufacture the pills under artificial conditions. Much of the research of external alchemy of the Tang Dynasty was therefore concerned with building a furnace and cauldron that was patterned after the natural furnace and cauldron of the sky and earth. Poisonings continued. After 300 years of failure in research and experimentation, external alchemy declined. Toward the latter part of the Tang Dynasty, the Taoists began to question whether immortality was indeed possible. This led to a rethinking of the meaning of immortality. One definition of immortality was influenced by Buddhism. Immortality was the liberation from the endless cycles of reincarnation. Another definition equated immortality with living a long and healthy life. The practitioners of the arts of immortality gradually turned to meditation, massage, calisthenics, and yoga-like postures for cultivating life. By the end of the Tang Dynasty, the heyday of external alchemy was over. During the final decades of its rule, the Tang Dynasty was beset with court intrigues, peasant uprisings, insubordinate provincial governors, and the constant threat of invasion from neighboring tribes. So people were concerned with just surviving and gave up the idea of the golden pill. So for the next 50 years, China was again plunged in political chaos. It's called the Five Dynasties came and went. And so this is called, and then 10, many areas were annexed and ruled by provincial governors who ruled like petty kings. And these are called the 10 Kingdoms. So the Five Dynasties and the 10 Kingdoms was this period of chaos. Many intellectuals abandoned politics and became recluses. Many of them were trained in the Confucian tradition. The most famous of these Confucian-trained Taoists was Lu Dongbin, Chen Tuan, and Wang Chongyang. These scholars, and more about them in a minute, these scholars retained Confucian values even as they embraced Taoism. The kind of Taoism that interested them were not talismanic magic of the celestial teachers or the external alchemist's obsession with the pill of immortality, but a form of Taoism that focused on cultivating virtue, health, quietude, and living in a simple, harmonious life. Again, we're circling back to the underpinnings of the original philosophical Taoism. Now, the Sung Dynasty was the golden era of internal alchemy. During this period, the theory and practice of internal alchemy reached a sophisticated peak unmatched really any other period of Chinese history. Lu Dongbin, generally acknowledged as the grand patriarch of internal alchemy. He's an important figure. In fact, he's even mentioned, I think, in your reading by Prothero. He comes to be one of what are known as the Eight Immortals, these eight demigod-like figures in Taoism who were once human but achieved some degree of literal immortality. Lu Dongbin, the person, transmitted his teachings to several students who in turn became founders of their own schools of the arts of longevity. One was Chen Tuan, who was most famous for his innovative techniques of Qi Kung or Tai Chi. Is a precursor of Kung Fu. Chen Tuan's form of internal alchemy integrated the cosmology of the I Ching, the Book of Changes, the Confucian ideas of cultivating virtue, and the physical techniques of circulating energy. Another student of Lu Dongbin was Wang Chongyang, who founded the Complete Reality School, one of the first Taoists to integrate Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. And we'll talk more about that in the next and final Taoist history lecture. But if anyone is to be recognized as the foremost theorist and practitioner of internal alchemy in the Sung Dynasty, it's Zhang Duan, who lived in the early part of the Sung Dynasty and received the teachings of Lu Dongbin through Lu Ha Chan. Zhang's writings are filled with metaphors of alchemy. He spoke of the furnace and cauldron, the firing process, the copulation of the yin and yang, and the crystallization of the golden pill by compounding lead and mercury. When his book, Understanding Reality, was published, Zhang Duan was hailed as the successor of Wei Po Yang. However, there's a difference between these two alchemists. For Wei Po Yang, there's the possibility of making the elixir from substances external. For Zhang Duan, all the ingredients and equipment necessary for alchemical processes are inside the body. At this point, external alchemy is essentially discredited. And that is a brief history of alchemical Taoism.